really go into it, I want to mention that everything that we've talked about so far in the presentations that Sean and I have provided, as well as the panel that we just heard from, are still relevant. D&I is also facilitated by developing and maintaining clear expectations, promoting and modeling effective communication, establishing shared goals, and a mission of work to be accomplished. I am pretty sure I nabbed that from Greg's article on the topic. So we'll be talking more about applying team science, the specific challenges related to applying team science, overcome the specific challenges that helps bring evidence-based practices to the people. And so with that, I think I want to echo a lot of what just occurred in the previous panel. There's lots of benefits of representation. It's incredibly important that you have people on your team that can contribute to the dissemination and implementation efforts of your project, and they can bring, importantly, the voice of those who you're going to disseminating your research to, and who you're going to implement this research to. So it provides the contextual elements that are so important to D&I research. Many academics, I know that we talked a little bit about having a shared understanding in the previous panel, and I personally think that's incredibly important. But it's also about trusting the members of the community, even if you don't understand the perspective that they're bringing to the table. You know, take time to understand the perspective, but you're never going to be necessarily an expert in their lived experiences. So it's important to, even if you don't understand, to trust what they're saying. You try to understand, but you may not always get there. When you have representation from the very beginning, the goals of your project become more shareholder-centric. So you have more of a patient, community, citizen-focused vision, and deliverables is no longer necessarily exclusively some sort of moving the needle forward in an academic sense, but moving the needle forward in terms of applying research to the people who are in need. And you will find that if you have these bones from the very beginning, you'll have quicker dissemination and implementation of this research. So I know I said we weren't going to be talking about shortening the 17-year gap, but having folks on board from the very beginning will help shorten that implementation time span. And to be frank and more practical, I think it increases your chances of getting funding. It shows a lot of foresight by having someone not only on maybe a board of advisees or some consultants or something, but as an actual showing that their voice is represented throughout the grant application, if that's your goal. And I just edited these slides a little bit. So this representation can come in different forms. From a grant application perspective, you can have individuals as co-PIs, potentially on advisory boards, letter of support, and consultants. And each of, whether the degree to which you choose or have this representation on the grant in which you're applying to, will depend on the focus of the grant. If there's not a lot of D&I focus, then it's likely not going to help you get those funds, and not necessarily applicable to that specific call. If you want to do more D&I, engage in more D&I efforts, you should focus on more D&I calls. And these are just the notes that I edited from the last panel. I was trying to take notes, answer questions, and edit these slides as we were going along. But I think having someone on board from the very, very beginning reduces the barriers for collaboration. So the previous panel discussed the importance of resource distribution. And I think that's incredibly important in from more of a budget perspective, having a shared understanding on how budgets are distributed. I know that's something that I learned about when I was a assistant professor, that $2 million isn't $2 million because, you know, Georgia Tech being an engineering school takes 56.4% of that for indirect costs. So having a shared understanding of how, like, where the money is going, how the money is being distributed, and the bureaucratic barriers that are in place. So I know there's a lot of barriers here at Georgia Tech in terms of paying individual people, that we have to mail checks instead of having some sort of gift card, which they won't allow. So making sure that there is transparency in these efforts and help building that shared understanding is incredibly important, and will help facilitate D&I. The importance of representation kind of goes back to what we were talking about before with the purpose of the team contract. It helps ensure everyone's on the same page, everyone knows their roles and responsibilities, everyone knows who knows what, but this is also relative to who is on the team. So we talked about shared mental models earlier, about as it is a important cognitive emergent state of team success. The problem is that there's a difference between, digging a little bit more deep into the literature, there's a difference between cognitive emergent state, shared mental models and accurate mental models. So you can have a shared mental model with your team members, but you could be wrong, right? You could all have the wrong perception of what needs to be done. Having someone and when you have, just say, a team of academics on for the very beginning, you will kind of facilitate this field of dreams that they were talking about. Those are photos of me from when I visited the Field of Dreams, but it will facilitate this sort of, if you build it, they will come attitude. So having that representation at the very beginning, again, I think is incredibly important because it helps break down those silos and facilitates the dissemination and implementation of your work. And your dissemination and implementation efforts are heavily determined by fit, whether it's fit with your shareholders, your environmental settings, your community. If you don't have a fit with the people who you are trying to help, then your efforts are all for naught. And as we talked about earlier, we did talk about these two constructs of voice, and actually, I don't think we talked about identity too much. So voice is the extent to which team members as a whole engage in the expression of constructive opinions, concerns, or ideas. Now, team identity is a little bit different. It's an individual's identification with a group or a team. Like, do they see themselves as a member of this collaborative effort? And I think oftentimes we miss the mark in just assuming that if somebody has a seat at the table, they feel like they have voice and they feel like they're a member of the team. So when you bring someone on board from the community, or when you start collaborating with the community, or when the community comes to you and asks to bring you on as a representative of the academic community, it's important that everyone who is on the team feels like they have a voice and feels like they are members of the team. And there's a variety of ways that you can do this. Blanca did an excellent job in our panel, ensuring that the community representatives on that panel were heard and that their voice was heard throughout the discussion. So ensuring that everyone's heard during the meetings. It's important to provide multiple venues to express their opinion. Sometimes individuals may not necessarily feel comfortable sharing their opinion in a Zoom meeting or an in-person meeting, and they'd rather share it through text or email or some other sort of venue. So making sure that you create opportunities for individuals to express their voice as much as possible is incredibly important. You need to also facilitate the ideas of sharedness and differentness. So emphasize the shared beliefs in terms of your shared values, in terms of the goals that you want to accomplish, but also discuss experiences, academic community-based experiences. There's also this, you can help facilitate ideas of sharedness through similar to me experiences. So I have experienced that too in my life. This is one of my motivations for accomplishing or pursuing this research or this goal, but also recognizing that individuals on your team will have unique perspectives, and you will, I mean, it's not necessarily required for you to be able to adopt that perspective, but it's important for you to trust and recognize and value that unique perspectives that individuals bring. Another way, kind of more practical way of doing this is promote voice and identity is involvement in social activities. So as cheesy as they sound, team bonding exercises can actually help individuals feel more comfortable in expressing their voice and feel more comfortable in identifying as a member of a particular team. It could be as simple as, you know, talking about something or just going out for coffee after a meeting. It can happen virtually, having some sort of virtual happy hour, or when we get back to it, in person. And one of the important tenets of transformational leadership is individualized consideration. So if you are a leader on this team, I think it's important that you recognize individuals on the team as well individuals. So this involves recalling personal facts or personalizing your leadership style to what's more amenable to them. I know whenever someone who I just met remembers my name or you know, remembers a personal fact about me in our follow-up meetings, those make me feel more part of their lives and more part of the collaboration in which they're having. So being able to, making a concerted effort to see the individuals on your team as not just teammates, but as people is, I think, an important way that you can promote voice and identity. Now, at times, there's going to be folks who were on the community who were not on board on the beginning and then become on board, or vice versa. You can't necessarily always have representation from the very beginning. So example, if you get a grant, you have a community representative on your grant, but you have add-on funds for generalizability efforts, or you a community partner needs to leave before the dissemination and implementation efforts begin. So you need to find a new community partner or transfer to a new site, or something changes within the community, and you have to have some sort of you have new or different adopters of new protocols within that community effort. So you're going to have to be able to adjust to those things as the team moves on with their effort. So it's critical to at least have in mind when these events occur to engage in some newcomer integration. So special welcoming activities by the entire team show that the entire team has invested effort in someone else coming on board, so an outsider coming on board. You do not want them to start feeling like a member of an out group when everyone should be an in-group member on that particular team. A more task-based way of doing this is revisiting the team contract right as they come on board. So if you have that team contract in place, explain what it is, explain why you did it, and then ensure that it's like, we want your opinion on this. We'll give you time to review it, and then we'll all sort of come together and discuss how the team contract can be adjusted to best suit you. Um, Along with a lot of the previous activities that I mentioned, a lot of those social activities can really help the newcomer feel welcome. And this can be especially hard in the digital environment. So there's some things that you can do in the digital environment. But the reason why it's so hard to collaborate across in the virtual context is when we're communicating right now. What happens is the information channel, the communication channel, it narrows down. So less information is being able to display to you right now. I mean, video conferencing is great. You can see my hand gestures. You can, hear the vocal intonation in my voice. You can see my facial expressions, and that's close to reality. But I can't be receptive to what everyone else is doing right now. Everyone has their video off, which we recommended, and but for constraint reasons. So the communication channel is smaller, less information is being able to be shared, and essentially you're creating a poor communication infrastructure if you're collaborating virtually. So when you collaborate in this context, the meaning of information is often lost or misinterpreted. For example, I don't know, I mean, many of you have probably read a text and been like, why did you send me this text? I don't understand what it means, or why are you being so mean, or are you really being nice? So a lot of you kind of project your own meaning onto this piece of information to, well, fill in the gaps, because you want to interpret the piece of information as much as you possibly can. And when this happens, it hampers good team development. Remember what we said yesterday is that communication infrastructure is the key to team development. And so when you have a poor communication infrastructure, when you're collaborating virtually, you're less likely to share quality information that will help build psychological safety and trust. And the events that promote psychological safety and trust are going to happen less often. And when they do all happen, is that it may lead to misinterpretation. And this can promote bad team dynamics as well. So it can promote things like team conflict when there is a misinterpretation or misunderstanding regarding some incomplete or bad information. And to be frank, there's distractions abound. I mean, I've learned this in teaching. I've learned this in doing workshops. I've learned this in these any sort of virtual interaction. We have a monitor and we can throw it in the back and say, I'm just going to answer emails during this talk, but I totally am paying attention. You saw me turn around earlier during the panels because I heard knocking on my window. Like, these things do not facilitate complete concentration. And so that is very difficult to overcome. And so some of the ways that you can overcome these barriers in virtual communication is when we can have a physical kickoff meeting. So a physical kickoff meeting is absolutely fantastic because it sets the stage and plants the seeds for the development of good team processes. The communication channels should be clear. Everyone has a shared opinion. There's no disconnects. There's no going in and out, transitioning to someone else. We're all socially acclimated to interact in person and not so much virtually. And so having a physical kickoff meeting is extremely important. Another way that you can do this is having a clear agenda or a reverse meeting style. I know we mentioned this yesterday. So for every meeting that you have, you need to have a clear agenda from everyone involved, making sure everyone's voice is heard. So this requires some sort of pre-planning. If it does, I know we talked about this yesterday as well. If it doesn't need to take an hour, then don't use an hour. If there's nothing on the agenda that needs to be discussed, you shouldn't meet. You can cancel it. But I think most importantly is having folks prepare a little bit before the meeting so you can actually have meaningful debates during during the meeting time. So learning more about the individual's perspectives or the specific issues with the community before the meeting occurs, and then having that discussion. So you come from a place of knowledge rather than, or information at the very least, instead of learning in the meeting itself. I don't know how many faculty meetings that some of us have been to where, you know, you have a clear agenda, you don't stick to an agenda. No one did the kind of reading what the dean sent beforehand. And so I think this is not also true of multidisciplinary teams or D&I research efforts. It's true in all sort of life. Turn your video on. This helps reduce it increases the channel richness. Better information is shared, even though it's not necessarily the best. Limit distractions. These are things that you can do at home. So turn your notification off, close out email or other work. Just try and limit the amount of distractions that you can possibly have, even if you believe that you can multitask. I'm telling you that you likely cannot. And then ensure involvement. So encourage the use. We have these wonderful technological tools in front of us. And I think it's important to establish norms around using all of their features that can facilitate discussion. So encourage the use of chat functions as well as video functions, call on people who haven't spoken, and be patient when asking for others' opinions. Some individuals may need to gather their thoughts for a little while. And so I think it's very important to wait for an answer from the folks that you are discussing with. And lastly, I want to just touch on how you really need to become, and this, I know I talked about this a little bit earlier, but becoming a community-centric team. Stakeholder community involvement from the very beginning is absolutely crucial. Effectively bringing science to the people requires the people's involvement. Research questions should consider the D&I perspectives from the very onset. And you should, for folks conducting D&I research, you should discuss D&I factors, as you can see here from the consolidated framework for implementation research. Go use a frame. I mean, I'm not a D&I researcher, and when researching this, there's like literally hundreds of frameworks that you can choose from. Pick one that works best for you and adapt it, and then go over it with community members, because there are factors that or barriers that you may not understand in your dissemination and implementation efforts. And I think one of the important things is, you know, the community member is not just the community perspective is not just a afterthought. Community leaders should be in leadership positions on your team. One does not need to be the team leader to purport the values of team science. So just because you understand team science and just because you understand the research doesn't mean that you're the leader of that team. You can speak up your opinions when community representatives are the leader of a particular effort or particular team or particular grant application. And I think we all need to be very comfortable with stepping back and supporting community action. So making sure that you're listening, making sure that you are not talking over or undervaluing the voice of the community. And that's it for me.